But Prof, I want us to get into, the discussion that is going around in the country right now, and that is the BBI.
Yes.
And I'm sure, of course, you have gone through the documents. A lot of debates surrounding it. What is your view on, the issues that are being proposed and, amending the Constitution at such a time? What are your views on that?
Let me first start by saying that I've always held the view that a constitution can be amended if necessary. In fact, immediately that we concluded the exercise of writing the constitution under the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, I wrote a book called The Postponed Promise in 2006. That was at a time when we did not succeed in having a constitution after the 2005 referendum. Subsequently, after the post-election violence, we had the 2010 constitution. And it is acknowledged that that particular constitution was one that was in many ways a ceasefire document. And when you look at that constitution, it is incoherent in a number of ways. It is incoherent partly because, one, it failed to appreciate the philosophical underpinnings of the Boma's draft. Two, when the harmonized draft was produced by the committee of experts, the politicians at Naivasha introduced things in a very uncoordinated manner. And that is why, for example, you see that the relationship between the National Assembly and the Senate is not clear. The question of representation, which is called the two-third gender rule, is not clear. And in terms of the competencies of the devolved units, so there is merit in some of the proposals. But let us look at the BBI. The BBI can be seen from different perspectives. It comes at a time on the 9th day of March, the year 2018, when Mr. Raila Odinga has lost the election, and he does not believe that he has lost the election. The country is under threat. In fact, some of the acolytes of Mr. Odinga threatened that the country be partitioned. And through both internal and external pressure, which I'm aware of, we have the rapprochement between Mr. Odinga and Mr. Kenyatta, and lo and behold, the Building Bridges Initiative, which therefore can also be described as a ceasefire between the two opposing parties and the 9-point agenda. And of course, it now makes certain proposals to amend the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The question that is being debated now, what is the merit, or what are the merits and demerits of the proposals that are contained in that document? A number of things which we don't talk about, but we must. How was the committee constituted? These were individuals who were handpicked by Mr. Odinga and by President Kenyatta. They are beholden to them. They are not like the members of the committee of experts who were competitively appointed, or the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission who were competitively appointed. And most of them actually are not experts in constitution writing. And ultimately they go out into the public and they make a claim that they have talked to millions, which is not true. If you read the document, the BBI committee actually received memoranda from 93 institutions, 7 community groups, and 328 memoranda only. They therefore claim that those individuals represented millions. And the spat that is now emerging, where one of the members, Major John Say, is saying that the document was doctored, speaks to what we are saying. That indeed this particular document is a document that does not largely represent the views of the people of Kenya. It is a political document. But that does not take away the fact that there are certain proposals which deserve attention. But let us look at the proposals from two perspectives. Most of them are not constitutional. One, as to whether one will pay the help loan, that is not a constitutional issue. Whether there is a tax holiday, that is not a constitutional issue.
Absolutely.
many of the things that you find there are cleverly introduced to create the impression that these amendments are going to benefit every sector of the society. And they are designed to camouflage what I consider to be the real intention of the political class, which are these. One, to expand the executive.
Yes.
And to expand the executive, we are being told that this is going to introduce inclusivity. I do not agree. When you create the office of the Prime Minister and you create the office of the two deputy Prime Ministers and you create the leader of the opposition, how does that in and of itself create inclusivity in a country where ethnicity has become the way of mobilizing the population? In my view, those who think in that direction, and with due respect to them, think that an arrangement such as that gives them the ability to marshal the leaders of the 5 major tribes, let's be honest, and therefore to attract votes and to win the presidency, the vice presidency, and the prime ministership. I'm not persuaded. I want to be persuaded that inclusivity is dealt with in that way. Number 2, it purports to address the question of gender rule, which is an affirmative action response. They lose the philosophy of affirmative action. Affirmative action does not exist for all times. Affirmative action is time sensitive. When you now introduce seats and you say you eliminate the women-only seat and you increase the number of seats to 360, how do you guarantee that you'll achieve that? And I'm not persuaded that that is not the route to take, that is the route to take. Then you say that you are now enhancing the size of the Senate to 94 and you are going to have women in that way. You then make affirmative action permanent, because remember, it is now women who are historically disadvantaged. In the next 50 years, it may be men who are disadvantaged. So if you look at the constitutional proposals, in my view, they fall below the standard. And the document is very poorly written. Those who have read it will tell you it's a very poorly written document. The other issue that they deal with is the question of devolution. And this is meant to be a sweetener to the governors and the people of Kenya. They are saying we are going to allocate 35% of the national budget to devolved units. Nobody does that.
Up from 15.
What you do is you devolve functions. Once you devolve functions, money follows functions. You don't devolve money. Because it's like telling your child or your son or daughter, I used to give you pocket money of 15,000 shillings. I'm now increasing it to 35,000. To do what with? Devolve functions. And when you devolve functions, the money will follow those functions. Once again, they fail to appreciate the model. So in a nutshell, there are certain things that look good, but on the constitutional proposals, I think they have missed the mark. And the document ought to be re-examined further so that it is cleaned. In fact, it pains me, as it must pain a Kenyan, when a few politicians say, we cannot reopen debate. How can you possibly say that? This is a document that is expected to address the interests of Kenyans who live now and Kenyans in the next generation. How can you arrogate to yourself the monopoly of power and wisdom and say that Kenyans cannot debate their document? What are we in a hurry for? Kenya is not being wound up. We may have the referendum now or choose to have it in the year 2022. In my own view, I hold the view that the right time to have a referendum is to add a second day to the election of the year 2022. The other thing that we are not talking about, is it going to be an omnibus referendum or a single issue referendum? Because we don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater so that we vote yes or no. If there are multiple issues, let us have questions posed on those so that we reject the things that we don't want and endorse the things that we think that are desirable. So the intentions in the BBI may be noble, But those who are marketing the BBI are doing it, in my view, so arrogantly that they are going to make the Kenyans throw the baby with the bathwater unless they know something that we do not know. But out of every 10 Kenyan that I'm talking to, 7 are saying we are going to vote against this document. Forget the newspaper reports about MCAs in this part of the world, religious people in this part of the world. Those ones, many of them represent nobody. The real Kenyans are now concerned with very mundane issues of survival. And when they hear that we are going to spend nearly 14 billion to conduct a referendum, they are saying, but we can't pay salaries in the counties. We don't have medicine. They say they would provide us with masks in the school. They are not there. Those who supplied goods and services to governmental institutions have not been paid for donkey years. They are saying this is placing the cart before the horse. That is not to say that this constitution does not need amendment. It does. You know, I expected the BBI to be bold, to say the following things. One, we have too many commissions. Let us reduce those commissions. The Commission on Gender, the Commission on National Cohesion can be merged into one commission with directorates, and you save the country money. I expected them to say that we actually reduce the devolved units in the following way. Create larger regions, 14 as we recommended at the Bomas of Kenya, or 18 at the very best. And then the present counties become sub-units, so that the representation at the devolved units are at a larger level, so that we de-ethnicize our country. Because right now, many of these counties are ethnic specific. That is why you hear the Chuka saying we want our own county. That is why you hear the Kuria say we want our own county. That is why you hear the Saboat say we want our own county. That is why you hear the Kuria say we want our own county. That is why you hear the Taveta say we want our own county. Kenya has the largest number of devolved units in the world after the United States of America. With a GDP of 90 billion shillings, the United States of America has a GDP this year of 22 trillion shillings, with 50 devolved units and 5 territories. This economy of this country is smaller than the economy of New York State. And our governor, to maintain our governors in Kenya, one governor is more expensive than to maintain the governor of any state in the United States of America. So let us look at these issues and let us ask ourselves whether what we want to do is really in the best interest of the country. Let us debate the issues in a sober way. And some of us who are taking this position are simply saying, persuade us by force of reason, not by intimidation. Just bring a better argument which is backed by facts, and if you carry the day by way of argument, we are going to support you. But when you tell us because we hold a different view, therefore we ought not to be listened to, that is not the democracy that you keep on talking about.
For the common wananchi, the common wanjiko, how exactly does this document help them? It looks like, you know, majority of the issues that are being talked about will only benefit the political class. So of what benefit is it for the common wananchi or my relatives back there in central Kenya?
You know, the man and woman in Meru, in Taita Taveta, in Kuria, are looking for service delivery, efficient service delivery. They want that if they go to a dispensary and a prescription is written, then they will get the medication. They want to hear that if they want agricultural extension office services, and if they are in Ilret or in Mandera, there is such a person on the ground. They want to hear that if they are talking about their education, we have something reminiscent of the Kenya School Equipment Scheme. Their children have books. I want to be persuaded how, when you rename the office of the cabinet secretary to a minister, how that helps in service delivery. I want to be persuaded. I want to be persuaded that if you have a prime minister, service delivery is enhanced. I want to be persuaded that if I have deputy ministers, that is enhanced. I want to be persuaded that if permanent secretaries are no longer vetted by the National Assembly, how that improves services. I want to be persuaded how, if you have all these things, Kenyans are the better. If you have 360 members of parliament, then service delivery is enhanced. I'm all for women being represented in policy positions. That is my position. I'm a father of daughters only. It is therefore in my patriotic and even selfish interest that women have a pride of place in the scheme of things. They ought to be there. But I'm not persuaded that the architecture that is proposed by this particular draft is one that will deliver on that. So to the Wanjiko, I do not see anything. You know, when you tell me that if you borrowed money from the Higher Education Loans Board, you will not repay until you get a job, you have a moratorium, that is very good. But how many people go to the university and therefore borrow from Higher Education Loans Board? Who are you talking about? The bulk of the people don't ever get there. I want to be told, when you say that young people now have something, a tax holiday, it only makes sense if you are doing anything, if you are doing something. If you are not doing anything, then there is no tax holiday. It's like telling somebody who has lost his leg that you'll be provided with shoes. So in many ways, one of the most painful things as a Kenyan is the assumption, whether witting or unwitting, of the political class in this country, that we are a bunch of fools and nincompoops, and that we are incapable of understanding their shenanigans, incapable of understanding that for some people in that political class, the BBI is a Trojan horse to deliver them the presidency and the prime ministership and all these other offices. That, to me, is most painful. And people across the country are raising very many legitimate issues. I've listened, I've read Gilles Cottrell writing very powerfully on how this particular draft does not meet the mark. I've listened to my very good friend Martha Karua writing very powerfully and passionately. I've listened to William Samoei Ruto, whose politics I do not support, but saying very clearly that there are issues that deserve debate. I've listened to my friend Moses Masika Wetangula saying the same thing, Musalia Mudavadi. These are Kenyans. And the only reason we are listening to them is because they enjoy the oxygen of publicity. There are many others who are speaking, but their voices are muted. In a nutshell, my dear friend, let us ask ourselves how this will help. You know, I love the words of the American Declaration of Independence. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that it is for this reason that governments are instituted amongst men, that they may help in midwifing these. Those are now my words. And that if a government does not do that, then it is also the right and the duty of those people to replace it with another. Will my life be the better? Right now, we are being told that we want to increase the number of MPs. If you ask many Nairobians to name 10 MPs in Nairobi, they don't know.
They can't.
Which means that their value to the people of Nairobi is minimal. If you ask them to go further and name the MCAs, they do not know. Right now, we are all talking about what General Badi is doing, as if we have no MPs, as if we have no MCAs, which tells you that at the point of service delivery, even the current architecture and occupants of office are not midwifing service delivery. In a single sentence, the proponents of BBI, the proponents of this change of the constitution need to tell Kenya what Daniel Moi once said very simply, almost simplistically. Does it add ugali on the table? Because that is where the road meets the rubber. That is where the road meets the rubber. And the question, they also tell us that because our elections are conflictual, this is the silver bullet that will cure us. Is it? When after every election cycle, when those who lose elections want to disband the electoral body, you and me were here when they hounded Chesoni out of office.
Yes.
You and me were here when they hounded Kivuitu out of office. You and me were here when they hounded Isaac Hassan out of office. You are here when they are saying Chebukati must go. It cannot be that every time we have a problem, we blame everybody else except ourselves. As Pastor Lai said, Kenyans are not divided. It is the political class. They are the ones who mobilize us from an ethnic standpoint. And I urge you to read Koigi Wawa Mwere's book, Towards Genocide in Kenya, The Curse of Negative Ethnicity. It is these politicians who ethnically hypnotize us and make us believe, they make the Luo believe that a Kikuyu is their enemy, and the Kikuyu to believe that a Kalenjin is their enemy, and the Luyas. We must now open our eyes and tell them that we shall be cheated no more. And I think that Kenyans are now asking valid questions, and the proponents of the BBI had better just calm down. President Kenyatta has ordered that for the next 60 days, there'll be no political activity. This is the time for the people to come together and ask fellow countrymen and women, what can we do to improve this document to help us achieve service delivery? You know, I grew up partly in my rural home and partly here in Nairobi. And I remember at St. Patrick's Primary School, every day, almost without fail, at 1 p.m., there would be hot lunch, buruga. Then it became supro, made at the city council kitchen next to Pumwani maternity. I remember living in Jericho and Maringo and ultimately in Eastleigh, when garbage was being collected on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And I remember Saturday we used to sing Kamero na Kauti na Kagoro Kamwe. Commentators used to say that garbage collection was as regular as a religious ritual in Nairobi. Houses were painted and fumigated every 6 months. That was service delivery. I never bought an exercise book. I never bought a textbook. It was the Kenya School Equipment Scheme. If you tell me those are coming back, then I hear you. If you tell me that the BBI is going to achieve that, then I'm all for BBI. But if BBI is creating jobs for the boys and the girls, oh, then I'm not for BBI.
All right. What would you then advise the proponents, as you're saying they should take the 60 days to come together? What would your advice to them be in as far as improving this document, which you're saying is very poorly written, is not persuasive in any form to the common mwananchi, I mean? What would your advice to them be?
The following things. 1, make a distinction between proposals for constitutional change and proposals for legislative change. The proposals for legislative change, those are within the domain of the Kenya Law Reform Commission. Let the proposals go out in the public for purposes of public participation. Let us isolate the things in the Constitution that ought to be looked at And let the proponents of the BBI remember that on the 26th day of February, the year 2014, Parliament, in its own wisdom, mandated the Auditor General of the Republic, then Eddie Ouko, to conduct a socio-economic audit of the Constitution. And he did, and produced a report in the year 2016. And that report isolates the things that ought to be done. And they include, among other things, one, that we define very clearly the relationship between the Senate and the National Assembly. Everywhere in the world where you have a Senate and the National Assembly, the Senate is the upper house. Let us have that clarity. Number two, if we choose to retain the current devolved units, namely the counties, let us consider the possibility of introducing an upper level so that the counties remain a subsidiary level, and the regional level is where we have the governors, and that is where we have the regional representatives. Will reduce the budget because there'll be no more than 14 or no more than 18, whichever we prefer. Let us therefore improve devolution in that way. Number three, let us make sure that we are clear about the services that we want to be devolved. We need not mention the money in the Constitution. Once we devolve the budget, or we devolve those functions, the budget will follow the money. And then let us have clear provisions on how we deal with historically marginalized communities so that we have monies that are kept in the kitty for them. Let us also look at the taxation regime. Which are the taxes that can actually be levied at the counties so that the counties don't look to Nairobi, the counties become economically viable. Let us, as number four, I think, look at the commissions. We have too many commissions. I do not believe, for example, that you need the Kenya Revenue Commission, the Commission for Revenue Allocation. How many times do you allocate revenue? I believe that that is a function that can be undertaken by a department in the Treasury. I don't believe that you need the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. That is an ad hoc thing that can be done periodically when it is necessary to do so. I don't believe that you need many commissions that we have. I believe that those commissions can be reduced to no more than 5. And the reason why I'm saying so, many of these commissions are all over the country with complete bureaucracies, and if you ask them what they do from 8 to 5 on a daily basis, 365 days a year, they can't tell you. Then as number 5, the numbering I may have confused a little, but as number 5, then let us look at affirmative action. How do we deal with the problem of representation of women as it is now? I'm still of the considered view that we should consider reducing the constituencies. In fact, that was the proposal. The 90 constituencies should be scrapped, and we introduce mixed member proportional representation where you have a list, the zebra listing of man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. Immediately you have 45 women. And those will be elected directly, will also be re-elected in that way. Then you go to the Senate, and you also have the women seats also available to us, and you retain the women only seat. Then you have solved the problem. And let us define what the role of each of these representatives are. Once we do all those things, then we'll discover that we have solved the problem. But there is a number 6. I don't think you need the office of a prime minister. I don't think you need the office of a deputy prime minister. What you can do, they say that they want government to be in the house. There can be a provision in the Constitution that makes the vice president to be a member of the house and the leader of government business. In the United States of America, the vice president is indeed the leader of government business in the Senate. Why can't we introduce the deputy president in the house so that he has a substantive job to do? Then your argument for having a prime minister disappears. And you know, one of the things that they are saying very cleverly, which is not very clever, is clever by 1/2, that when you are appointed a prime minister, you will not have any additional salary. Who are they cheating? It is not the salary that is the worry of running an office. Salary is a pittance. is what goes into that office, the motorcade, maintaining that office, the budget. So let us not be hoodwinked by these little things. And the other seventh thing that we've got to look at is the independent boundaries and electoral commission. This idea of shuffling holders of these offices, commissioners, like cards every other minute is not right. I hold the view that this idea of cheating in elections can be minimized. There is no perfect election. You constitute every constituency into a final electoral unit, so that this idea of collation, and it can be done very easily. If you are in Tharaka Nithi and the parliamentarians are there, or whoever is competing, the presidential candidates are there, what you do is that all documents are signed and sealed at that time. And that comes to my next suggestion. Separate presidential elections from gubernatorial and other elections, so that on the day we are electing the president, we are electing the president. So that all eyes are on the president, this idea of ballots being mixed are not there. If we do those, and my good friends who are in the BBI, if you are honest and you do those, we'll be moving in the right direction. If you want to call your cabinet secretaries, I still call them ministers anyway. Some of them are my friend. I've never gotten used to cabinet secretary. I still call them ministers. If you want to call them ministers, well and good. A rose by any other name is a rose. So if those are some of the issues, there are many others that I think one can talk about. But I think that is a good representation of what I think they should look at very clearly. And if they do that in good conscience and with the desire to change the service delivery in this country, then I think we would have a referendum that simply fulfilled the constitution requirement. You would not even need to campaign for it. The people will have endorsed it, and people will know this is in our best interest. Yes.
All right. And we shall, of course, be keeping an eye on that and see whether they take that and advise.